The gunshot cracked through the dry afternoon air, shattering the stillness of Willow Creek, just as Josephine Hartley's last hope shattered with it. Her father, once the proud owner of the largest cattle ranch in the county, lay buried in the hard Montana earth, leaving behind nothing but debt and a daughter with few prospects in the unforgiving year of 1878. Josephine stood at the edge of her father's fresh grave, the Montana wind whipping her chestnut hair across her tear-stained face. At 22, she had expected many things from life, perhaps love, children, a home to call her own, but not this cruel turn of fate that had left her alone and destitute. The bank would take everything tomorrow. The ranch hands had already been paid their final wages from what little money remained. The cattle had been sold at auction for a pittance. Miss Hartley, the lawyer, Mr. Peterson, approached hesitantly, clutching his hat to his chest. "I'm afraid there are some matters we must discuss regarding your father's arrangement with Mr. Blackburn." Josephine turned, her amber eyes hollow with grief. "What arrangement?" Peterson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Your father borrowed a substantial sum from Elijah Blackburn 6 months ago. In return, he offered—" "Well, he offered your hand in marriage to Blackburn's nephew should he be unable to repay the debt." The world seemed to tilt beneath Josephine's feet. "He what? It's all legal, I'm afraid. The contract is binding." Peterson couldn't meet her eyes. "Blackburn's nephew, Vincent O'Malley, will be arriving tomorrow to claim both the remaining property and you." "My father sold me." The words came out in a horrified whisper. "It was a desperate measure, Miss Hartley. The drought had decimated half his herd, and the railroad company was threatening to bypass Willow Creek entirely if certain payments weren't made to the right officials." Peterson shifted uncomfortably. "Your father hoped to turn things around before it came to this." "And this Vincent O'Malley, what manner of man is he?" Josephine's voice had gone cold, her spine stiffening as she tried to process this betrayal. Peterson's hesitation told her everything. "He runs Blackburn's operations in the Northern Territory, has a reputation for being effective." Effective? Josephine had lived in the West long enough to understand what that meant. Vincent O'Malley was likely as cruel and ruthless as his uncle, a man known throughout the territory for breaking both laws and men with equal impunity. "When will he arrive?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Tomorrow's stage. Miss Hartley, I truly am sorry." The lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder, which she immediately shrugged off. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Peterson, but I believe I would like to be alone now." She turned back to her father's grave, waiting until the lawyer's footsteps had faded before allowing the tears to fall again. That night, Josephine packed what little she could carry. Running seemed futile. Blackburn's men would find her, and the consequences would likely be worse, but staying meant surrendering to a fate she couldn't bear to contemplate. She had heard stories of arranged marriages, of women treated as property, of cruelty behind closed doors. With no family and few friends close enough to help, her options were painfully limited. Morning came too quickly. Josephine had barely slept, dark circles shadowing her eyes as she stood on the porch of what had once been her home, watching the stagecoach rumble down the dusty road toward the ranch. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down her best dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been her mother's. If she was to meet her fate, she would do so with what dignity she could muster. The stagecoach pulled to a stop in a cloud of dust. Josephine steeled herself, chin raised despite the fear coursing through her veins. The door swung open and a tall figure emerged. Vincent O'Malley was not what she had expected. He moved with the fluid grace of a man comfortable in his own skin, his lean frame suggesting strength rather than brutality. His face, partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, revealed features that were striking rather than handsome: a straight nose, firm jaw darkened with stubble, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore simple clothes, a dark shirt, worn denim pants, and a leather vest with a gun belt slung low on his hips. Nothing about him screamed wealth or power, yet something in his bearing commanded attention. He surveyed the property slowly before his gaze settled on Josephine. Something flickered across his face, surprise, perhaps, or disappointment, before his expression returned to careful neutrality. "Miss Hartley." His voice was deeper than she'd imagined, with a slight drawl that suggested he'd spent time in Texas. "Mr. O'Malley." Josephine kept her tone even, refusing to show fear. "I understand you've come to claim your property." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at her words. "I've come to honor an agreement between your father and my uncle. An agreement I had no part in making." "No," he agreed after a moment. "I don't imagine you did." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Josephine waited for him to make demands, to assert his ownership, to reveal the cruelty she was certain lurked beneath his controlled exterior. Instead, he removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. The gesture was oddly formal, almost respectful. "I'm sorry about your father." The unexpected sympathy caught her off guard. "Thank you," she replied stiffly, unsure what game he was playing. "You've packed," he observed, noting the small bag at her feet. "I assumed you would want to leave immediately." Leave, or more accurately, be taken. The thought made her stomach clench with dread. Vincent studied her for a long moment. "That was my intention, yes." He glanced at the modest ranch house behind her. "But perhaps we should talk first." Josephine led him inside with reluctance, hyper-aware of his presence behind her. The house felt different, already emptier, as though it knew its mistress was leaving. She'd spent the previous day wrapping her mother's china and storing family heirlooms she couldn't take with her at the Reverend's house, hoping they might be safe there. In the kitchen, she automatically reached for the coffee pot, her hands betraying her nervousness as she attempted to light the stove. "Allow me," Vincent said, moving beside her with unexpected gentleness. His fingers brushed hers as he took the matches, and she flinched at the contact. He noted her reaction with a frown but said nothing as he lit the stove. "I don't need your help," she said, more sharply than she'd intended, clearly. His voice held no sarcasm, only calm acknowledgement, "but I'm offering it anyway." While the coffee brewed, they sat at the worn kitchen table, an uncomfortable silence stretching between them. Josephine kept her eyes fixed on her folded hands, unable to look at the man who now essentially owned her. "I suspect you have certain expectations about this arrangement," Vincent finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "I expect to be treated as property, Mr. O'Malley. Isn't that what I am? A possession transferred from one man to another." Bitterness laced her words. "Is that what you think of me?" The question was soft, almost hurt. "I don't know you," Josephine countered, "but I know your uncle's reputation." Vincent's expression hardened. "I am not my uncle. Yet you're here to collect on his debt, to collect me." He leaned forward, those winter sky eyes intent on hers. "I'm here because I gave my word, because your father signed a contract, because this is how things are done." "How things are done," she repeated flatly. "Men making decisions about women's lives without their consent." "Tell me, Mr. O'Malley, what kind of life awaits me as your wife? Will I be locked away, beaten if I displease you, used for your pleasure and discarded?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Is that the kind of man you think I am?" "I don't know what kind of man you are." Josephine's composure finally cracked, her voice rising. "I know nothing about you except that you work for a man who ruins lives for profit, and now you own mine." Vincent stood abruptly, turning away from her. For a terrible moment, Josephine thought she'd pushed too far, that the cruelty she expected would now reveal itself. Instead, he walked to the window, staring out at the mountains in the distance. "I understand your fear," he said finally. "In your position, I would feel the same." The admission surprised her. "Then why go through with this?" He turned back to face her. "Because I gave my word, and because I believed," he stopped, reconsidering his words. "I had hoped to offer you protection, not imprisonment." "Protection?" Josephine laughed without humor. "From what?" "From men who would take advantage of your situation. From poverty. From," he gestured vaguely, "from the harshness of this life for a woman alone." Josephine rose, anger replacing fear. "I am not some helpless creature in need of your noble rescue, Mr. O'Malley. I've run this ranch alongside my father since I was 16. I've broken horses, mended fences, and delivered calves in blizzards. I don't need your protection, I need my freedom." Vincent studied her with new interest, as though truly seeing her for the first time. "You're right," he said after a moment. "I've underestimated you. For that I apologize." The apology caught her off guard again. This man was nothing like she'd expected. "What happens now?" she asked warily. "Now," he said, retrieving his hat from the table, "we have a choice to make. We can honor the contract as written, or, Josephine held her breath, "or we find another way." Vincent's expression remained unreadable. "I won't force you, Miss Hartley. Whatever happens next must be your choice." Before Josephine could respond, hoofbeats approached outside. Vincent moved to the window with the alertness of a man accustomed to danger. "Were you expecting company?" he asked, his hand moving instinctively to his gun. "No." Josephine joined him at the window, her heart sinking as she recognized the riders. "It's your uncle's men." "I recognize them from town." 3 riders pulled up in front of the house, led by a barrel-chested man with a face like weathered leather. "O'Malley," he called out. "Blackburn sent us to make sure everything's proceeding according to plan." Vincent's expression darkened. "Wait here," he told Josephine, his voice low. "Let me handle this." "They're here for me too," she protested. "Trust me," he said, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity. "Please." Something in his gaze made Josephine nod, though trust was the last thing she felt capable of offering. She watched from the window as Vincent strode out to meet the men, his posture relaxed but alert. "Jackson," Vincent greeted the leader. "My uncle's concern is unnecessary. I have the situation well in hand." "He thought you might need help persuading the lady," Jackson replied, his gaze shifting to the window where Josephine stood. The leer in his eyes made her skin crawl. "Some women need convincing about their proper place." "The lady doesn't need persuasion." Vincent's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. "And my uncle's instructions were clear. This matter was entrusted to me alone." Jackson dismounted, ignoring Vincent's words. "We rode all this way. Least you could do is offer us some hospitality." His smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth. "Maybe introduce us to your new bride." "That won't be happening." Vincent's hand hovered near his gun. "You've delivered my uncle's message. Now I suggest you ride back and tell him all is proceeding as arranged." The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Jackson spat on the ground. "Always thought you were too soft for this business, O'Malley. Your uncle's beginning to think so too." "My concern at the moment," Vincent replied evenly. After another tense moment, Jackson remounted his horse. "We'll be staying in town tonight. Blackburn wants the deed to this property delivered to him personally. We'll escort you both back tomorrow." "That won't be necessary." "Wasn't asking." Jackson tipped his hat mockingly. "See you in the morning, O'Malley. Give the lady our regards." Josephine stepped back from the window as the men rode away, her mind racing. Vincent returned to the house, his expression grim. Your uncle doesn't trust you, she observed, with good reason. Vincent removed his hat again, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I've been looking for a way out of his operation for months. What? Josephine stared at him in disbelief. Vincent sighed heavily, sinking into a chair. My uncle doesn't know it yet, but I've been working with a federal marshal to build a case against him. Blackmail, extortion, murder, he's guilty of it all. And you've been helping him. Accusation colored her tone. I've been playing a part, Vincent corrected. My father died owing Blackburn money just like yours. I was 17 when my uncle took me in, taught me the business. By the time I understood what he was really doing, I was already implicated. His expression grew distant. But 6 months ago, he ordered me to burn out a family who wouldn't sell their land. There were children, Miss Hartley. That's when I went to the marshal. Josephine sank into the chair across from him, trying to process this revelation. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve the truth, and because our situation just became more complicated. He leaned forward, his voice urgent. Jackson and his men will report back to my uncle. If we don't appear to be complying with the agreement, they'll take matters into their own hands. So I'm still trapped, Josephine concluded bitterly. Not necessarily. Vincent's eyes held hers. If we play this right, we might both get what we want. And what is it you want, Mr. O'Malley? Freedom, he answered simply. From my uncle. From the reputation I've built. A chance to start over. The sincerity in his voice was compelling, but Josephine had learned the hard way that men's words couldn't always be trusted. What are you proposing? A temporary arrangement. We appear to honor the contract, travel to Silver Peak together as husband and wife. I deliver the deed to my uncle personally, as expected. Once there, I can get you safely to the marshal, who can help you establish yourself elsewhere with a new identity, away from my uncle's reach. And what do you get out of this arrangement? The final evidence I need against my uncle. This contract, he tapped the folded document in his vest pocket, proves he's engaged in human trafficking. Once he accepts the deed, the marshal can arrest him. Josephine considered his words carefully. You're asking me to trust you, to pretend to be your wife? Yes. Vincent's gaze was steady. I know that's asking a lot given the circumstances. It's asking everything, she corrected. Vincent hesitated, then reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. Miss Hartley, Josephine, I give you my word that no harm will come to you while you're in my care. Whatever arrangement we make between us, you will find only kindness here. She looked down at his outstretched hand, then back to his face, searching for deception. How do I know you're telling the truth? You don't, he admitted. You have only my word. But consider the alternatives. Josephine stood and walked to the window, staring out at the land she had loved all her life. If Vincent was lying, she would be trading one prison for another. If he was telling the truth, freedom might be possible. If I agree, she said finally, I want your promise that when this is over, I'll be truly free. No claims, no obligations. You have it, Vincent replied without hesitation. And this marriage, it would be in name only. A flicker of something disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded. Of course, whatever terms make you comfortable. Josephine took a deep breath, scarcely able to believe what she was considering. When would we leave? Tomorrow morning. Jackson and his men will be expecting us. Vincent stood, maintaining a respectful distance. We should be married before we leave. It will make our story more convincing. The reality of what she was agreeing to hit Josephine anew. Married, tomorrow. It's the only way to ensure your safety during the journey, Vincent explained gently. My uncle's men won't dare touch a woman they believe is mine. A possession, after all, Josephine murmured. Vincent stepped closer, his expression troubled. Not to me. His proximity made her pulse quicken. though whether from fear or something else she couldn't say. "Very well, Mr. O'Malley, I accept your proposal such as it is." "Vincent," he corrected softly. "If we're to be married, even temporarily, you should call me Vincent." "Vincent," she repeated, the name unfamiliar on her tongue. A faint smile touched his lips. "We should make arrangements with the Reverend, and perhaps prepare for what lies ahead." The next few hours passed in a blur. They rode into town together, Josephine painfully aware of the curious glances and whispered comments that followed them. Willow Creek was small enough that news of her father's arrangement had clearly spread. The Reverend, a kind old man who had known Josephine since childhood, agreed to perform the ceremony the following morning with obvious reluctance. "Are you certain about this, my dear?" he asked when Vincent stepped outside to secure their horses. "No," Josephine answered honestly, "but I have few options, Reverend." "There are always options," he countered gently. "You could stay here, the community would help you." Josephine shook her head. "Blackburn would still come for the ranch, and anyone who helped me would suffer for it." She managed a weak smile. "Besides, Mr. O'Malley seems different than I expected." "A kind captor is still a captor," the Reverend warned. His words haunted Josephine as they rode back to the ranch, the setting sun painting the landscape in fiery hues. Vincent remained respectfully silent beside her, seemingly lost in his own thoughts. That evening they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, sharing a simple meal Josephine had prepared. The domesticity of the scene felt surreal given the circumstances. "Tell me about Silver Peak," Josephine said, breaking the silence. Vincent looked up from his plate. "It's larger than Willow Creek, rougher. My uncle's influence touches everything there. And that's where this Marshal is, the one who's helping you," he nodded. "Marshal Daniels, he's a good man, trustworthy." "Unlike your uncle," Josephine observed. A shadow crossed Vincent's face. "My uncle taught me many things. Most importantly, he taught me what kind of man I don't want to be." "And what kind of man is that?" "The kind who preys on others' misfortune, who values power above all else." His eyes met hers. "The kind who would force a woman into marriage against her will." "Yet here we are," Josephine said softly. "Here we are," Vincent agreed, his expression troubled. "But this marriage is a means to an end, not an exercise in ownership. When this is over, you'll be free to pursue whatever life you choose." "And what life will you choose, Vincent?" "When your uncle is imprisoned and your obligation fulfilled," the question seemed to surprise him. "I haven't thought that far ahead. Survival has been my primary concern." "You never dreamed of something more?" Josephine pressed, curious despite herself. A faint smile touched his lips. "Once. Before my father died, I wanted land of my own, cattle, a simple life." His smile faded. "Dreams seem like luxury items when you're indebted to a man like Elijah Blackburn." "I understand that better than most," Josephine admitted. Their eyes met across the table, a moment of genuine connection that startled them both. Vincent cleared his throat and stood, breaking the spell. "It's getting late. You should rest. Tomorrow will be challenging." "Where will you sleep?" Josephine asked, suddenly anxious. "The barn will suit me fine," he assured her. "I've slept in worse places." "Thank you," she said, relief evident in her voice. Vincent paused at the door. "Josephine," he said, her name careful on his tongue. "I meant what I said earlier. You'll find only kindness here. Whatever happens next, whatever you decide, remember that." After he left, Josephine sat alone in the quiet house, turning his words over in her mind. Could she truly trust this man she barely knew? A man who, by his own admission, had worked for one of the most ruthless criminals in the territory. And yet, something in his eyes, in the gentle way he spoke, made her want to believe him. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through Josephine's bedroom window. She dressed with care in her mother's wedding dress, a simple cream-colored gown with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. The irony of wearing it for such a marriage wasn't lost on her, but it felt right, somehow a connection to her past, as she stepped into an uncertain future. Vincent was waiting on the porch when she emerged, freshly shaven and wearing a clean black coat over his usual attire. He stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "You look beautiful," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you," Josephine replied, a blush warming her cheeks despite herself. "It was my mother's. She would be proud," Vincent offered quietly. He extended his arm. "Shall we?" The ceremony at the church was brief and sparsely attended. The Reverend spoke the traditional words with a solemn face, clearly troubled by the circumstances. When the time came to exchange rings, Vincent produced a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he explained softly as he slipped it onto Josephine's finger. "I want you to have it, regardless of what happens next." The unexpected gesture touched Josephine deeply. "I have nothing to give you in return," she whispered. "Your trust is gift enough," he replied. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent lifted her chin with gentle fingers. "Only kindness here," he murmured before placing the lightest of kisses on her lips. The contact was brief, but sent an unexpected warmth through Josephine's body. This wasn't how she had imagined her wedding day, and yet there was something in Vincent's touch that felt genuinely tender. Outside the church, Jackson and his men were waiting, their presence a stark reminder of reality. "Congratulations," Jackson drawled, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Ready to head home to Silver Peak? We'll leave within the hour," Vincent replied evenly. "We need to collect our belongings from the ranch." Jackson's gaze lingered on Josephine, making her skin crawl. "Don't take too long. Blackburn's eager to welcome his new niece to the family." The ride back to the ranch was tense, with Jackson and his men following at a distance. Once there, Vincent helped Josephine gather her few possessions while explaining their plan in hushed tones. "We'll be traveling for 3 days," he said. "Once we reach Silver Peak, I'll arrange a meeting with my uncle immediately. Marshal Daniels will be watching. When the exchange is complete, he'll move in." "And what happens to me during this meeting?" Josephine asked. "You'll be with me," Vincent assured her. "I won't leave you alone." "You truly believe this will work?" Vincent's eyes held hers. "It has to, for both our sakes." The journey to Silver Peak proved even more challenging than Josephine had anticipated. They traveled by stagecoach, Vincent beside her, Jackson and his men following on horseback. Each night, they stopped at rough roadside inns where Vincent insisted on sharing a room to maintain their pretense as newlyweds, though he always arranged for separate accommodations for himself, sleeping on floors or chairs to preserve her modesty. It was during these quiet evenings, away from prying eyes, that Josephine began to truly know Vincent O'Malley. He spoke of his childhood in Texas, of his father's struggle to maintain their small ranch, of his mother's death from fever when he was just 12. He described the crushing debt that had sent his father to an early grave, and the uncle who had appeared like a savior, offering the orphaned boy a home and purpose. "I was young and angry," Vincent explained on their second night, his voice low as they sat before the small fireplace in their rented room. "Blackburn channeled that anger, shaped it into something useful to him. By the time I understood what he was really doing, I was already complicit." "You were a child," Josephine pointed out. "I grew into a man who should have known better." His expression was haunted. "I've done things I'm not proud of, Josephine. Yet here you are trying to make amends." Vincent looked at her with surprise. "You don't condemn me." "We've all made choices we regret," she said softly, thinking of her own father's desperate gamble that had brought them to this point. "What matters is what we do next." Something shifted between them that night, a tentative trust building in the quiet hours of shared confidences. By the third day of travel, Josephine found herself watching Vincent with new eyes, noting the kindness he showed to struggling travelers they encountered, the quiet strength with which he handled Jackson's thinly veiled threats, the gentle way he helped her in and out of the stagecoach. Silver Peak appeared on the horizon late on the third day, a sprawling town nestled in a valley between jagged mountains. Unlike Willow Creek's modest collection of buildings, Silver Peak boasted proper streets, multiple saloons, and even a small theater. The wealth generated by nearby silver mines was evident in the elaborate storefronts and well-dressed citizens. They took rooms at the Grand Hotel, the finest establishment in town. For the first time, Vincent did not arrange separate sleeping accommodations, a fact that made Josephine's heart race with nervous anticipation. "Jackson will be watching," he explained apologetically as they entered the lavishly appointed suite. "We need to appear convincingly married." "I understand," Josephine replied, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Vincent crossed to the window, peering down at the busy street below. "My uncle will expect us to dine with him tonight. It's his way of asserting control, showing off his new acquisition." "Me," Josephine clarified bitterly. "The ranch," Vincent corrected. "You were never meant to be part of this transaction, not really. My uncle simply saw an opportunity to bind me more tightly to his organization. By giving you a wife," the concept still stung. Vincent turned to face her, his expression troubled. "By giving me a stake in the future, a reason to continue his work." He sighed heavily. "What he doesn't understand is that you've given me exactly the opposite, a reason to end it once and for all." Before Josephine could respond, a knock at the door announced the arrival of their luggage. As the porter arranged their bags, Vincent moved to stand beside Josephine, his arm slipping naturally around her waist in the picture of a devoted husband. The casual intimacy sent an unexpected thrill through her body. When they were alone again, Vincent stepped away, giving her space. "We have 2 hours before dinner with my uncle. You should rest if you can." "I'm not sure rest is possible," Josephine admitted. "I'm too anxious about tonight." "That's understandable." Vincent hesitated, then added, "My uncle is observant. He'll be watching for any sign that our marriage isn't genuine." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to be convincing," Vincent replied carefully. "We need to appear comfortable with each other, affectionate." Josephine swallowed hard. "I see." "Nothing inappropriate," he hastened to add. "Small gestures only, but enough to persuade him that this is a real marriage." "And is that what you want?" The question escaped before Josephine could stop it. Vincent's eyes darkened with an emotion she couldn't identify. "What I want stopped mattering a long time ago," he said quietly. "What matters now is getting you safely through tonight and securing the evidence the marshal needs." The answer disappointed her, though Josephine couldn't have explained why. "Then we'll be convincing," she promised, lifting her chin with determination. 2 hours later, they descended to the hotel's private dining room where Elijah Blackburn awaited them. Vincent's uncle was not what Josephine had expected. Rather than the imposing brute she had imagined, Blackburn was a slender, elegantly dressed man with silver at his temples and cold, calculating eyes that assessed her like merchandise. "My dear nephew," Blackburn greeted, rising to shake Vincent's hand. "And this must be the lovely Mrs. O'Malley. My condolences on your father's passing, my dear." "Thank you, Mr. Blackburn," Josephine replied, forcing a smile as Vincent's arm tightened protectively around her waist. "Please, call me Uncle Elijah. We're family now, after all." Blackburn's smile didn't reach his eyes as he gestured to the table. "Shall we dine? I'm eager to hear how you're settling into married life." The meal that followed was an exercise in tension disguised as pleasantry. Blackburn asked pointed questions about their wedding, their journey, their plans for the future, each query designed to test the authenticity of their relationship. Vincent answered smoothly, his hand often finding Josephine's, his gaze lingering on her with convincing affection. "And how are you finding my nephew as a husband, Mrs. O'Malley?" Blackburn asked during the dessert course, his eyes sharp with suspicion. "I've always worried he lacks the necessary firmness for managing a household." Josephine felt Vincent stiffen beside her. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand over his on the table. "On the contrary, Mr. Blackburn, your nephew has shown me nothing but kindness and consideration. I count myself fortunate indeed." Something like disappointment flickered across Blackburn's face. "Kindness is well and good, my dear, but a woman needs a strong hand to guide her. I'm sure Vincent will learn this in time." "I believe I've learned all I need to know about being a husband," Vincent replied, his voice deceptively light as he brought Josephine's hand to his lips. The gesture sent warmth coursing through her. Blackburn studied them for a long moment before changing the subject. "I trust you've brought the deed to the Hartley property?" Vincent nodded. "Of course. I'll deliver it to your office in the morning, as arranged." "Excellent." Blackburn smiled thinly. "And then we can discuss your next assignment. There's a particularly stubborn rancher north of here who's refusing my very generous offer for his water rights." "Actually, Uncle, I was hoping for some time to establish my household," Vincent countered smoothly. "My wife deserves my attention after the upheaval she's experienced." Blackburn's expression hardened. "Business doesn't wait for domestic bliss, Vincent. I expected more dedication from you." "My dedication has never been in question," Vincent replied, an edge entering his voice. "But marriage brings new responsibilities." The tension between the two men was palpable. Josephine placed her hand on Vincent's arm, both to soothe him and to maintain their charade. "Perhaps a compromise," she suggested with a smile she didn't feel. "Surely a few days wouldn't delay matters significantly." Blackburn's cold eyes assessed her with new interest. "You're more shrewd than I expected, Mrs. O'Malley. Very well. 3 days, then Vincent returns to work." He stood, signaling the end of dinner. "I'll expect you at my office at 9 tomorrow morning, Vincent. Don't be late." After Blackburn departed, Vincent escorted Josephine back to their room in silence, his jaw tight with tension. Only when the door closed behind them did he speak. "You handled him brilliantly," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Few people stand up to my uncle, even indirectly." "He's exactly as cruel as I imagined," Josephine observed, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "Just more refined about it." Vincent nodded grimly. "That refinement makes him all the more dangerous. He truly believes his actions are justified the necessary cost of building an empire." "What happens tomorrow?" Josephine asked, unable to keep the anxiety from her voice. "I meet with my uncle as planned. Marshal Daniels and his deputies will be watching the office. Once the deed changes hands and Blackburn acknowledges our arrangement, they'll move in." Vincent ran a hand through his hair. "It should be straightforward." "Should be," Josephine repeated skeptically. Vincent sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "I won't let any harm come to you," he promised. "Once this is over, you'll be free to go wherever you choose. Start fresh." The thought brought less comfort than Josephine expected. "And you? What will you do once your uncle is arrested?" "Testify against him," Vincent replied without hesitation. "After that?" He shrugged. "I haven't thought much beyond ending his hold over me." "You could start fresh too," Josephine suggested softly. Vincent's smile was tinged with sadness. "Some stains don't wash out so easily." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the coming day heavy between them. Finally, Vincent stood. "I'll sleep in the chair tonight, you take the bed." "Vincent," Josephine said, surprising herself by catching his hand. "Thank you for treating me with respect, for giving me a choice, even when circumstances didn't." He looked down at their joined hands, something vulnerable crossing his face. "You deserved better than this arranged marriage, Josephine, better than being tied to a man with my past." "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but I'm beginning to think I could have done much worse." The morning dawned clear and cold, a brisk wind sweeping down from the mountains. Josephine woke to find Vincent already dressed, standing by the window with tension evident in every line of his body. "It's time," he said when he noticed she was awake. They breakfasted in silence, both too anxious for conversation. At 8:30, Vincent tucked the deed to the Hartley ranch into his coat pocket and turned to Josephine. "Stay in the room until I return," he instructed. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me or Marshal Daniels." "How will I recognize the Marshal?" Josephine asked, fastening the buttons of her dress with trembling fingers. "He's tall, broad-shouldered, with a gray mustache and a scar across his right cheek." Vincent hesitated, then stepped closer, his hands gently settling on her shoulders. "Josephine, if something goes wrong, if I don't return, go to the livery stable on Pine Street. Ask for Tom. Tell him Vincent sent you. He'll help you get safely out of town." Fear clutched at Josephine's heart. "You expect something to go wrong." "I expect nothing and prepare for everything," he corrected. "It's how I've survived this long." Vincent's hands moved to cup her face, his touch infinitely gentle. "Whatever happens today, know that meeting you has changed me. Reminded me that there are things worth fighting for beyond my own freedom." Before Josephine could respond, he leaned down and kissed her, not the brief, formal touch of their wedding, but something deeper, filled with unspoken emotion. She found herself responding instinctively, her hands clutching the lapels of his coat, drawing him closer. When they parted, both were breathing heavily, surprise evident in Vincent's eyes. "I shouldn't have. I'm glad you did," Josephine interrupted, surprising herself with the truth of it. A complex mix of emotions crossed Vincent's face before he stepped back, visibly gathering his composure. "I'll return as soon as I can." After he left, Josephine paced the room, unable to settle. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. By mid-morning, anxiety had given way to genuine fear. Something had gone wrong, she felt it with increasing certainty. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. "Mrs. O'Malley," a deep voice called. "Marshal Daniels, I need you to open up." Josephine approached cautiously. "How do I know you're really the Marshal? Your husband said you'd ask that." "Gray mustache, scar on my right cheek. Vincent sent me to get you to safety." Heart pounding, Josephine opened the door to find a tall man matching Vincent's description, badge gleaming on his chest. "What's happened?" she demanded. "Where's Vincent?" The Marshal's grave expression sent ice through her veins. "There's been a complication. Blackburn had more men than we anticipated. There was gunfire. Vincent, is he dead?" Josephine whispered, gripping the door frame for support. "No, madam, but he's been shot. Doctor's with him now at my office." The Marshal offered his arm. "We need to move quickly. Blackburn's remaining men are looking for you." The next hours passed in a blur of fear and desperate hope. The Marshal's office was a fortified building at the edge of town, deputies standing guard outside. Inside, Vincent lay on a narrow cot, his face pale beneath a sheen of sweat, bandages wrapped around his shoulder and chest. "Josephine," he whispered when he saw her, attempting to sit up before wincing in pain. "Don't move," she ordered, rushing to his side and taking his hand. "You'll reopen your wounds." "Blackburn?" Vincent asked, looking to the Marshal who had followed Josephine inside. "In custody," Daniels confirmed. along with most of his operation. Your evidence was exactly what we needed. The deed sealed it proved he was engaging in human trafficking. Relief washed over Vincent's face. Then it's over. It's over, the marshal agreed. You're both free. Josephine's eyes filled with tears as the reality sank in. You could have been killed, she choked out, squeezing Vincent's hand. It was worth the risk, he replied softly. For both our freedoms. The marshal discreetly stepped outside, leaving them alone. Vincent's fingers weakly squeezed Josephine's. You can go now if you want. Start that new life. The marshal says he can arrange passage to San Francisco or even back east if you prefer. Is that what you want? Josephine asked, studying his face. Vincent's eyes met hers, vulnerability plain in their blue depths. What I want is to be worthy of you, Josephine. To be the kind of man who deserves a second chance with you, if you're willing to give it. You risked your life to free me from a contract I never signed, Josephine reminded him. I'd say that makes you more than worthy. Hope bloomed in Vincent's expression. Are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to know the man I married, Josephine replied, leaning closer. The real Vincent O'Malley, not the one who works for Elijah Blackburn, the one who promised me only kindness. That man loves you, Vincent confessed, his voice rough with emotion. Has since the moment you stood on that porch in your blue dress, chin raised despite your fear. Josephine's heart swelled. Then that's where we'll begin, she said softly, bending to press her lips to his. With love and with kindness. 6 months later, Vincent and Josephine O'Malley stood on the porch of a modest ranch house overlooking a verdant valley in Colorado Territory. The spring air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers, and in the distance, a small herd of cattle grazed peacefully. You think your father would have approved? Vincent asked, his arm around Josephine's waist as they watched the sunset paint the mountains gold. Of the ranch, absolutely. Josephine smiled up at her husband. Of you. Eventually, you'd have won him over with your determination to build something honest. And have I won you over? Vincent's eyes crinkled with the smile that still made Josephine's heart flutter. Every day, she assured him, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. With every kindness, large and small. Vincent's arms tightened around her, his kiss deepening with the passion that had only grown in their months together. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. I never imagined finding this kind of happiness. Nor I, Josephine admitted, especially not in an arranged marriage to a man I feared. Fear turned to love, Vincent mused, perhaps not the conventional path to matrimony. But our path, Josephine replied. And I wouldn't change a step of it, not even the frightening ones. They all led us here. As twilight settled over their new home, Vincent lifted Josephine's chin with gentle fingers, the same gesture that had first kindled hope in her heart nearly a year before. Only kindness here, he promised again, sealing the words with a kiss that spoke of both their past journey and the brighter future they would build together.